Hello, in this tutorial we will be looking at scrolling frames because I've seen on many forums, discords, people struggling to make their buttons fit perfectly in a scrolling frame. So we can go through that today. We'll be creating an inventory with just base parts, which is just one single part, and another one with models. So first things, we go to replicator storage, and I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this items. This will be used to store our base parts, which we will create via a script. In Started UI, you need to click on the plus sign and go down to Screen GUI, and then if you rename that to Inventory Base Part, all these frames and scrolling frames and buttons we will create are just going to be very basic, no bells or whistles or anything like that. Within your inventory base part, just create a frame. We're going to set the anchor point to 0.5 and 0.5 on the X and Y to make sure it's in the center of the screen. In the position, change the X and Y scale to 0.5 so it's exactly in the center of the screen. I'm going to change its size. The scale will be 0.5, the offset will be 0. On the Y, the scale will be 0.6 and the offset is 0. Within the frame, we can now create our scrolling frame. So if you click on the plus sign against frame and then go down to scrolling frame. Now we just need to position this, because I'm going to put a title at the top. So we just need to position it down by 0.1 on the scale on the Y. And then on the size, the scale on the X wants to be 1, so it fills the frame, offset 0, on the Y 0.8, and the offset is 0. And I'm going to change the canvas size, the scale 1 on the X and 1 on the Y. Make sure offset is 0 on both. And I'm going to change the scroll bar thickness to 20, and the scrolling direction will be Y, so it just scrolls up and down. Now within the scrolling frame, we will create a UI grid layout. This will do all our positioning and sizing for us when we add buttons. If you click on the frame just below inventory base part and then click on text label and just rename that to title, we will change the size on the X to scale 1 so it fills the frame. The offset is 0 and the scale on the Y is 0.1 and the offset is 0. In the text field, I'm just going to call this inventory, and then I'm going to check text scaled. And if you click on the plus sign against frame and then go down to text button, we're going to make a close button so you can actually close this window. I'm just going to change the background color to red. Set the anchor point on the X to 0.5 so we can put it in the center of the frame. The position will be 0.5 on the scale. The Y position will be 0.9 on the scale. And the size, you can make this whatever size you want, but I'm making it the scale 0.2, offset 0, and on the Y, scale 0.1 on offset 0. Change the text to close, and then just make it text scaled, and I'm just going to change the color, text color to white so you can actually see it. And that's the basic of our frame. Now we're going to make a template which we will use to clone So if you click on the plus sign against inventory base part and go down to image button, important you change the background transparency to 1, uncheck visible, and at the bottom you need to change the image transparency to 1. Now within this template, we need to click on the plus sign and go down to viewport frame. If you scroll up to the top, and the background transparency needs to be 1. We're going to change the scale of the size to 1, offset 0, and on the Y, scale 1, offset 0, so it fits that image button. And make sure the image transparency remains 0. If you click on the plus sign against template, go down to text label. We're just going to make an equipped flag so we know if something's been clicked. We know what the state is. So I'm going to call that equipped flag. Change the size on the scale to 1, the offset to 0, and we're going to change the position so it's at the bottom of this button. So I'm going to make the scale 0.9, and we're going to change the scale of the size on the y-axis scale to 0.1 and the offset to 0. If you make the text unequipped, so UN-EQUIPPED, and just change the text scaled to on. If you click on starter, the plus sign against starter GUI, go down to local script, rename that to inventory base part script, and we're just going to set some variables at the top so we know who the local player is. We're going to set another variable to the location of that screen GUI. So we do player.player GUI wait for child inventory base part. Now we're just going to make some random blocks to put into this inventory. So we make a random seed into the variable rn, and then n will be a random number between 50 and 100. And we're just going to do a for loop for what a equals 1 to whatever that random number is, and we're going to create some blocks. So the name will be item space dash space and concatenated with whatever a is in the for loop. So at the beginning it will be 1, then it'll go to 2 and 3 all the way up to n. The shape will be a block. The size will be 2 studs by 2 studs by 2 studs. Make sure it's anchored, otherwise it'll just fall down when it gets parented to the scrolling frame. And the brick color is just going to be a random color, and we'll parent that to that folder that we created in replicator storage. Now, after that, we need to create a table called button. This will host the mouse button 1 down functions. So we need to create some more variables for our scrolling frame, one for the UI grid layout. We need one for the scroll bar thickness. We need one for the width of the scrolling frame, the absolute size. Now that's in pixels, and the absolute size.y is also in pixels, because we can't use scale when we're doing scrolling frames. It just doesn't work as expected. And we can set some padding in pixels for the space between each button on the X and the Y scale on the Y axis. So you can change those to whatever you want. And now this next line on line 30, this is the number of buttons that you want to see on the X axis. So if you can change that to how many buttons you want to see. And then the next one is how many buttons you want to see on the Y scale, on the Y axis. So at the moment I've set that to 1.5, so you can see one whole button, and then you'll see half of the next button. So you can see you can scroll it. It's just more of a visual thing. Now the next line, on line 33, this is going to be the size of our button on the X. So we take the scrolling frame width X and we minus that with the scroll frame. In brackets, we do that one first. And then we take the padding on the X, we times that by the number of buttons we want to see on the X, and then we divide the whole lot by the number of buttons, and that will equally space the buttons out nicely. And basically the same on the Y as well, on the Y axis. And then we need to set the cell padding on the UI grid layout to whatever we want it to be, what we set in line 27 and line 28. And then the cell size, that is the button size, that's that calculation on line 33 and line 34. And now we're just going to loop through all of the blocks that have been created in the replicated storage items folder. We're going to clone the template from the inventory base part. And we're just going to call that whatever the block's called. So it'll be item space dash space, whatever number we are up to. I'm just going to parent that to the scrolling frame. And the next one, we will create a world model and we will parent that into the viewport frame. And now we're going to clone the part. That's the block that was randomly generated, and we will parent that to the world model. Now, local studs, this will be how many studs you want the camera back. So how far back it will be to view the part that we're showing in the button. Now, at the moment, this section of code now is just checking which is the largest part, which side of the base part is the largest, and then it will take that number and it will move the camera back by the largest axis of the actual part that we are looking at. Now, if you want it slightly further back, you could still use this code and then maybe on line 61 do studs equals studs plus whatever, how many studs more back you want it. But at the moment, this will fill the entire button with the part. So line 62 is where we're going to create a camera. This will be used so we can actually view what we want to see. And we set its C frame to the part clone's position plus its look vector times the number of studs by the part clone dot position. We will parent that to the viewport frame, and then we set the viewport frame's camera to the camera that we've just created, ensuring that the button is now visible because we made it false in the template. Now this is important that the scrolling frame canvas size is updated each time we add a new button. Now, this is our button table that we're just going to increment. This is the mouse button one down function, so we know when a button has been clicked. Now what I like to do is just make everything unequipped, and then we will make the button that we've clicked equipped. If it was unequipped, we'll make it equipped. If it was equipped, it will stay unequipped. So if V is a image button and the name isn't the thing that we've just clicked, then we'll make that equipped flag text to unequipped. So if it's unequipped, then I'm just going to set it to equipped. else make it unequipped. And now this little section of code is to do the close button. So if that button gets clicked, then we just set the inventory base part enabled property to false, so it goes away. And I'm just going to change the inventory base part enabled to false and reset on spawn to false. So if you click on the plus sign again, started GUI, go down to screen GUI. We're just going to create a button so we can view the inventory. I'm just going to call that inventory base part button. And within there, just create a frame to put our button in. So I'm just going to set its position and size. So I've made the scale 0.2 on the X and 0.1 on the Y, ensuring offset is 0. Now within the frame, if you click on plus sign and then go down to text button, make the size, the scale 1 on the X, offset 0, on the Y, scale 1, offset 0. I'm going to change the text to inventory base part. I'm going to make that text scaled true. And then click on the plus sign on text button and then go down to local script. I'm just going to rename that to button. Make some variables, local player, so we know who the local player is. The location to the inventory base part. I'm just going to make a variable for that. So script.parent, mouse button 1 down, then connect the function. And if that inventory base part enable property is false, we will make it true, so it turns it on. And if it is true, this is just the else clause, we'll just turn it to false, so it turns off. And that's it for that script. Now if we go to play, and you click on the inventory base part, and there are your buttons, perfectly spaced, perfectly fitted within the scrolling frame. Nothing's distorted. And you can click it, and it turns it to equipped and unequipped. You click on another one, and it changes it to equipped and unequipped. Click on close, and it goes away, just how we want it. So I'm going to show you how you can change the number of buttons that you may want to see in your scrolling frame. So I'm going to change it to 6. So it should now display 6 buttons on the X-axis. And there you go, there's 6. So now I'm going to show you 2 So it now should show 2 buttons on the X. And there you go. And it's all perfectly aligned, perfectly spaced, fits perfectly. So now we're going to do the models. So in replicated storage, if you click on the plus sign and go down to folder, I'm just going to rename that to, I think it's items model. And then I was just going to create a very simple model. It's going to be the worst tree you have ever seen. So I'm going to insert a block part and move it over away from the spawn point and just pop it down so it's on the floor. I'm just going to make a very, very simple trunk. I'm going to change this material to wood. So it even looks like a tree. Make sure the anchored is off. I'm just going to insert a sphere for the leaves. I'm just copy and pasting the position so I can get it on top so I don't have to line it up. Just paste it on and then I can just move it up. And then I'm going to change its material to grass. If you click on both those parts and then hit Control G to group to create the model, I'm going to rename that to tree. And if you just select the trunk and do Control D to duplicate that part, because what we need to do is put a box all the way around it, and then we're going to call this hitbox, and we're going to weld those 2 parts to this hitbox. So just make sure it covers the entire object or the entire model. And then set its transparency to 1. Ensure this part is anchored and can collide is off. And I'm just going to rename that to hitbox. And if you click on the plus sign against hitbox and then go down to weld constraint, part 0 will be the hitbox, part 1 will be the first part, and then I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate that, and then part 1 will be the next part. And then in the tree, in the model, just set the primary part to hitbox. And then I'm going to move that into replicated storage. Now, most of the stuff for the inventory is going to be the same. We just need to change a couple of things because now we need to deal with primary parts. So everything in started UI, select everything and then hit Control D. I'm just going to change the second script to inventory model script, and then the second inventory base part will become inventory model, and then the second of the inventory base part button will become inventory model button. Now, if we drill down through inventory model button as well, I'm just going to move the frame over so it's on the other side of the screen. And then if we go down to the text button, and we just need to change that text to inventory model. And then if we go into the local script, we just need to change that location to inventory model. There's nothing to change in the inventory model screen GUI, but we need to go into the inventory model script and just change line 2 to it reads inventory model. This section from line 10 to 16, it needs to be deleted and changed because we're going to clone the tree instead, rather than creating random blocks. So we're just going to loop through the part that we've just cloned. I'm just going to color it. So if it's a base part, then make the brick color dot random. I'm just going to parent that to game.replicator storage items model, and then that's it for that section. Line 40 needs to be changed to from items to items model. And line 53 needs to be part clone dot primary part dot size dot x. And the same on line 54 needs to be changed to part clone dot primary part. 56, 57, 59, and 60 also need to be changed, because the primary part of this model is the hitbox, and we're dealing with everything with that. Line 64 needs to be changed. So it's part clone dot primary part dot position. We need to change all these part clones to part clone dot primary primary part. And if we click play, and if we click on inventory model, there are trees, perfectly spaced. You can exactly the same before, equipped, unequipped, click close, click base part, and that's it. So I hope this gets you through your scrolling frames woes, because I know they can be frustrating sometimes. But feel free to use any part of this code.